Welcome to our session, The Politics of Business, hosted by Excel National Office, which consists of Excel Phoenix, Las Vegas, San Jose, Arizona State Collegiate Chapter, Southern California, and the University of Arizona Chapter. My name is Anita Malik, and I am your moderator for this conversation today. I've spent the last 25 years in the Arizona tech scene. I'm a professional journalist as well. I've served as deputy director at Arizona State University and chief operating officer for a local tech company here called ClearVoice. I was also the 2018 Democratic nominee for Congress in Arizona's 6th Congressional District. I am proud to be joining Excel tonight. I've known the founder and the current board chair of Excel, Jason Wong, for over 20 years, and I've had the opportunity to see the good work the organization has done over the years to inspire and to challenge us to grow and work together for a stronger community and success in our careers. So I'm very happy to be here tonight, and I thank you all for joining us. As we get started, if you could type in the comment field your location. Let us know where you're tuning in from live today, and when you're all set and ready, give us a thumbs up, so we know that we're not having any technical issues and that you can hear us and you're ready to get this conversation started. So we're going to get some of those comments going. And while that happens, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Excel if you are new to Excel. So Excel is the largest and fastest growing, largest and fastest growing community organization. And I'm just pulling up a different slide here. One second, sorry about that. It's the largest and fastest growing Asian American professional community organization in Arizona. There's a professional chapter in the Valley, and as I mentioned before, 2 collegiate chapters, Arizona State University and the University of Arizona. We hope some of you are joining us tonight. They have expanded as well to Southern California, San Jose, Las Vegas, and Excel continues to provide its members with tools and resources to further career advancement and to empower Asian Americans to become great leaders as well as reliable employees. And so tonight, in line with this vision of a world where everyone has the skills and opportunity to lead, we've set some short-term and long-term goals. In order to achieve those goals, Excel offers a diverse range of professional development programs on the local level. They may include a series of panels, workshops, and seminars, and conversations like we're having here tonight. Excel engages its membership in community activities with ongoing mentorship as well, cultural awareness, and professional networking events. Tonight's event does really speak to that aspect of serving the community as we talk about what it means to get involved and make an impact in our communities through politics. Technology, business, and politics are all linked in a very profound way, but we often fail to recognize the potential impacts of this intersection. That's what we're here to discuss tonight. We'll discuss how I and our special guest have navigated both of these worlds, business and politics, and how it's changed our perspective and path, and we welcome your questions. And so with that, joining me in this conversation, I am very honored to introduce Albert Shen. Albert was a small business owner from Seattle in Washington. In 2013, though, he decided to run as a candidate for Seattle City Council. After that, in 2014, he was appointed by President Obama to be the National Deputy Director of the U.S. Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency. And currently, he is with Verizon Smart Communities, and he's the national lead for smart airports to implement new smart city systems utilizing 5G and Verizon 4G LTE network in cities and airports across the United States. Albert, welcome.
Thank you, Anita. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so great to have you. So tell us a little bit as we kick off, a little bit more. Your bio is actually quite extensive. I condensed it short there because I'd rather hear from you. Tell us more about that transition from being a small business owner and then being appointed by President Obama and where that's really led your career.
Yeah, no, thank you again for having me here. I'm calling in from Dallas, Texas, so you can add Texas to your map of area that you're influencing immensely. So, but yeah, I think the journey I have is quite fascinating in a lot of ways. It definitely interjects business and politics. I ran my own business, yeah, for many years, working in the airport capital development world. But as a business owner, I realized the importance that how politics affected my business in terms of government contracting, funding, and access and market intelligence on what was going on. So I really started in terms of raising money for local city council candidates, introducing to small business owners. Back in 2008, we're going through the Great Recession, so also helping the Obama administration at that time with telling the struggles of small businesses. So, we have a responsibility to not only, grow our business, but to help other business owners as well to grow as well. So I did that, served on many local, state and local level community boards appointed by governors or, city councils or mayors because they needed the diversity of business owners in the world of governance and government policy. Then I got that crazy bug to run for office. So just like yourself, Anita, that it is quite the leap of faith. It is a mind-altering experience. So I'm sure our minds are different than what it was before when we ran for office. But it was rewarding because you get to know how government works and how much business is so much dependent on what the government does. But I didn't win my race, but that's when the work I was doing for President Obama, the White House asked me to join the administration, and it fit perfectly into the world at the U.S. Department of Commerce at the MBDA, Monterey Business Development Agency. So that's really where I took my business background, entrepreneurial background, in applying that to actual government policy as a real life business owner, so I can deploy that and actually help the government better serve business owners and entrepreneurs at many different levels all around the country, and specifically the Asian American community, because I think often our community didn't get enough visibility, and that was the importance in terms of the administration and national director I was serving under. That was important that we reach all the different communities, especially the Asian American community. But yeah, so here I am and glad to be here. And thank you again for the great conversation.
Yes, no, thank you again for joining us, and we're excited to get further into this conversation. Before we do, though, I want to encourage you, if you're watching live on Facebook, to go ahead and put your comments or questions for myself or Albert in the comment box, and they will get to us here in our Zoom, and we will take those during the conversation. We also have a Q&A later as well, but please don't hesitate. We're here to answer your questions and to help in any way we can with what you're looking at with your professional development and obviously civic engagement. So Albert, you said you had that bug to run. I had that bug to run, but we don't see that bug to necessarily get involved in politics, whether it be running or in working on a campaign, just being involved in the local political scene. We don't see that bug in our community that often. I think that, you did this back in the day, and I think that was something that we really didn't see. And we're starting to see it more with more AAPI candidates running, more people getting involved in the administrations and working throughout government. What do you think it is that culturally we can do or communicate to have people understand what you just talked about? You got in using your business understanding, knowledge, experience to affect change in our businesses. I mean, that direct line is there, but I think we often don't recognize that or see that as we are working in our business careers and see that as another avenue. What would you say to people that are kind of considering that avenue, or how do we have that conversation?
Well, yeah, I think if you even think about as a business owner, just like you, if you're going after contracts, if it's public sector or government contracting, I mean, that's one of the fundamental ways. I mean, you can't just submit a proposal. You got to know the right players. You got to know when the money is coming, because the government process is very transparent. When budgets are passed, what policies, what zoning. That's why I always advocated business owners need to get onto boards and commissions, because they're always looking for that diversity. When you sit on those boards and commissions, you get to know the deal makers and the influencers in terms of what are things the city is going to do or the state is going to do, or even the taxes that we pay. So, because what we do as business owners, affect that. So if you think about all the things that impact your business, it's because of government regulation. So, but the hesitancy, I think, for Asian Americans is a persona that politics has to be separate from business. There's always this, we have, for whatever reason, the shield that says, oh, we can't talk about politics, we can't get involved. But, every day politics happens whether you like it or not. So it's a matter if you want to be involved or not, just like, when you ran for office too, so in terms of, and it's also a matter of representation. So, I see, since you ran too, myself, I've seen even more Asian Americans run for office
Mhm.
now. And I think we're seeing many more of that state and local and even at the congressional. So in the US Congress now, between the African American, Latino, and Asian caucuses, they now represent almost 40% of the congressional body. So that's a lot of diversity. So this is a lot of influence on federal budget. So, but yeah, I think we have to, lower our shields and
Right.
understand and not be afraid of it. And we need good people to run because that is the most important thing. And you think about what's going on right now, anyone can run. So it is not a
Exactly.
hard bar to cross. So I think if you
Right.
have
I mean,
the
no
desire,
matter what you think on the political spectrum,
yeah,
that is the reality, right? I mean, that is the truth. And what happened in 2016 in this country was somebody not being of a political background becoming our president. I think that actually spurred a lot of people to run for office that have never had that political background, and myself included. So it is something that it is a leap of faith, like you mentioned. But our civic engagement goes from everything from simply just casting a vote, making sure you're registered, making sure you're voting, to that level. And so there's such a wide range. And I wanted to hit on what you just said with boards and commissions, because you were quoted recently talking about this idea of government contract jobs, and how they're still, we're seeing actually the diversity in who's receiving those still being kind of flatline, if not decreasing, which is really hard to see that happening in 2020. You think we'd be farther along in that. And so you were quoted as saying, and it makes so much sense, it's because the people that are giving out these contracts know who they know,
yeah,
right? They're not exposed. It's not an excuse, but it's somewhat a reality. If they're not exposed to these different businesses, to these different areas of diversity, what else can people do, boards and commissions, to make sure then people do know about our businesses, they do know about our AAPI community, to elevate that? What else would you recommend?
one thing I always like to do, especially if you want to involve government or politicians, and it doesn't have to involve money. You can always
Mhm.
contact your local council member and say, hey, and if you've got other colleagues or business colleagues, says just come have coffee with us, have a roundtable, introduce you around, get to see our community, get to see our business owners, whether it's restaurant retail, which is struggling so much because of the pandemic, whether it's the hospitality, or on the technology innovation. Elected officials love to come tour and see what's going on in their district as constituents, and they have a vested interest. So that's something a very low cost thing to do, is to build that relationship. So that's one thing I think. Another thing, again, you just have to lower your shield. There are
Right.
people too, and just call them up as, hey, we want to invite you to come see this, or an open house. And as long as you get in a couple minutes to talk, then you are golden. So yeah,
It's just, we're all business people, so we understand the art of networking. It's
yeah,
the same, right?
it's the same
We
thing.
just don't often include and think of politicians and elected officials as that network that we need to build. But kind of the premise of this whole conversation is that the two need to work together, and particularly for our small business community. I think people think this is about big corporations, and no, this is our small businesses that need that access so they can have the conversations about what's happening in their area, in their district, in their community, and what they need to succeed.
Yep,
So yeah,
yep,
for sure.
exactly.
I want to remind everybody that's watching, if you have questions, let us know. But I wanted to switch a little bit to kind of, if somebody's out there watching, thinking about getting involved in a campaign, running for office some day down the future. I always said I'd run someday down the future, and then suddenly I just ran. And so if those thoughts are percolating in your mind, and you're a person from business or tech like Albert and I, you went from business to politics. I did a little bit the opposite, right? The business side. I think I was able to look at a campaign the first time I ran and said, well, there's all these things I've learned being a chief operating officer that I'd bring operationally to the world of campaigns and community building. And then now that I'm on the other end of it, I'm thinking, my brain goes to entrepreneurial ideas that are business related, but involve politics. So I've brought some learnings in and taken some learnings out. What skill sets do you think you got out of that run that changed really your career trajectory?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I commend you on your run, right? It's a frightening thought at times, and
Yes.
sometimes your family's going to go, "What the hell are you doing?"
Right.
Right? But you do it for your community, and I
Yeah.
think that's the number one thing. You're doing it for your community, the people you care about. But there's a lot of things you can do, in order to, make. And I guess the one thing I did learn that most once you get into that is, how to talk to the media, right?
Mhm.
Because once you run, you're in the media spotlight. And the media is another thing that we are tend to be very shy about,
Right.
in terms of politics. But the media can be used very effectively. It's a two-way street. So how you address the media, how do you answer questions, how do you do an interview? That was actually one of the most compelling things I learned was on how to interact with the media in a way where it's a collaborative relationship. And then if you have that, it can be helpful, when you want to get a story out for your business, or, tell something that's going on in your community, or, frankly, even offer a tip, anonymous tip. Sometimes they love that. So that's actually a very powerful thing. And we have a whole ecosystem actually of Asian American journalists, like there's the Asian American Journalists Association, which I've been a big supporter of. So, sort of as Asian American business owner, the Asian American journalists, there's that connectivity. So if there's one thing I would say that was the most compelling thing to learn, that was pretty fun and interesting.
And I think that applies. I mean, if you're just running your own business at some level, because you want to get that media, that marketing, that press out for your business, depending on what your business does. And
Yeah.
so those cross skills for sure are important. And, I actually have a background in journalism going into this as well with the tech, and have done content technology over the years. And so I thought, and I'm bringing this up because it's such a valid point that you forget. I thought I would be fine dealing with the reporters because I'd been on the other side. But it is something different to sit on the side where you're the one being interviewed, because, the press is under pressure. We see their budgets being cut as well. Things move very quickly in the digital world. We're no longer in the era of a few news outlets. And so there's that snippet. What snippet are they going to take? And so learning, and I don't know if this is kind of what you had to learn, is learning really what is that real solid message you want to get across, and making sure you're able to lead the conversation. I think that's a key for anyone listening that wants some media training. Lead the conversation. Make sure that you own that conversation, because your message is what you're trying to get out there. And sometimes that can get lost.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. I keep trying to think what I learned the most, and I didn't realize that was something, but it is something. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much that you can take from it. For me, again, it was that organizational aspect. I've worked in tech marketplaces for the last several years, in different versions of marketplaces, which, really the idea of the gig economy and how we work together. And so I kind of did that with my campaign, and we really brought creative forces together in a unique way. It was very untraditional from how standard campaigns are run, which was questioned quite a bit. But, in 2018, we pulled a little upset off doing that. And I think it's because we're not afraid, if you've been in the tech space or the startup space, to try new things, to think a little bit outside of that box. And I was able to bring in new technologies and try things differently. And so for me, it was a fun sort of playground of pieces together, saying this is how candidates and campaigns run on these traditional programs and software technologies and methodologies. But here's what I could maybe just come up with what I know from business, and see if it's more efficient.
Right.
So there's, I think, a learning that can come out of it in so many different ways. Looks like we have some questions. So we have a question about the involvement of family. You mentioned the sacrifice that we have to go through with our families. And it is, I think, from any race you run up and down the ticket, it is such a sacrifice. And our families deserve so much gratitude and credit. Extended families as well, because I know you have little kids. They take care of them for us. Yeah. And so what tips, is the question, do you have to keep your family really together and moving together on that mission of that campaign? What would you say?
Well, I think starting on that journey has to be an open communication because it is, because if they're not on board, it's going to be very challenging. So, yeah, I mean, I tell you, it wasn't easy for us, because we were doing a distant for a while too and running. So we were running around a lot together, but I think they were very understanding of the need why I was doing it and why it was necessary. So and they got to learn a lot from it too. But it is just when you have time to spend with them, you spend time with them, and
Mhm.
you have to chime out, as difficult that is. So like I said, I went through that process. It was very up and down,
Mhm.
but at the end, I think it was a rewarding thing for everyone to see and be part of. So, and the kids enjoyed it,
Right.
seeing your name. I mean, the first shock of you were running, right, is when you
Right.
see a yard sign, your name on a yard sign in someone's yard or something. So that's the realization. It's like, oh wow, I am actually doing this. So, but yeah, I think it's just communication, understanding up front, and then there's going to be ups and downs. So without a doubt, but you just have to work through it and celebrate the fact that you're doing something for the community.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that kids enjoy that moment. We always had kids in our community, the kids' friends, and their
Yeah.
parents would tell me, "Oh, we thought they see your sign. They love to see your sign," because there's that connection. But yeah, it is very much a family decision from the get-go, because back to the media training idea, I mean, you're suddenly in the spotlight, and your name is out there, and
Yeah.
what you're doing is out there. And so it is one of those things that you have to go through together in so many ways. I think I've been trying to think of the most solid tip I could give. And I think it is laying out what the schedule might look like, as much as you don't know. And I think for the women out there that are considering running, uh, you know, people always said to me, and I'll be quite frank about it, well, who will take care of children? I have younger children, two boys. And what you realize is that, women in these positions, South Asian, Asian American women as well, all of us really have had to always have that balance. If we want to make it ahead in our career, there is that balance you have to come up with. This isn't anything different. I think people are scared off with the hours of politics and running a campaign, but you can make it work. You just have to think a little bit differently from your normal schedule. So one thing we got very good at is I spent more of the drop off the kids to school, morning time, a little bit of that after school time, and then I was gone. A lot of campaigning in a non-COVID era is you're out at night, you're speaking to people, you're having those meetings, and so that was kind of our shift. We had that trade-off. And I also know another candidate, a gentleman that ran, and I remember talking to one of his campaign staffers, and he said he will always make sure he's home for dinner, so he carves out everything around that 1 hour. If you can make it work, you can make it work. And so there's a lot of ways that you can make it work with family, again, even if you're running for school board, because there will be those intense moments right at the end of an election cycle, like we're seeing now for so many candidates.
Right.
So do you have something else you want to add on that, Albert? Because I'm going to
No,
look,
no,
we
I
have a
see
couple
some
questions.
great questions pop up
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. So what can we do to be more influential and involved in politics other than running for office and serving on commissions? We touched on that a bit with local elected leaders, inviting them to see your business. What can I do with my money or audience to help influence government and policy?
Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. So that's a great way. As when I mentioned earlier about getting other business owners together,
Mhm.
what you do is you call the elected official. You have a relationship with that elected official initially. Says, "Look, I will do a fundraiser for you." So this in the world, right? It's called bundling. So what you do is you get other people that to write a check, or nowadays it's online, to do a little host an event and say, look, I'm going to help raise you $1,000 or $2,000 or $10,000 for your campaign. Once you do that a few times, I'm telling you, once you raise money and bundle money for a candidate or an existing elected official, you have to let them know, you're going to get people together and that you get credit for the money that other people are putting in. So they have systems that track that. So it's all tracked online, every fundraising system, right? So we've all been there because we know when you look at the report sheet, you can say, oh, who brought in this amount of money? Who wrote this amount? So that is actually tabulated. And once you build up enough of that, trust me, then they will take your call on a lot of issues. And if you have a question about something, they will always get back to you, or you want to host them for a tour, they always come. Or you can say, look, if you can ask the elected official, hey, if you ever need anything, let me know in terms of ideas and bringing business policy, bringing business people, because sometimes they have a policy that they want backing on. And he says, look, I will help round up people to support you on this, you know? So it's a very two-way transactional, you know, relationship. I know we keep talking about money and politics, but at the end of the day, like we both ran for office,
Yeah.
it's the blood of politics and government. So you can't avoid it. And big money, small money does not matter.
Right.
So the more bundling you can do, I'm doing that, you know, frankly, for the Biden campaign, and more. I've been helping do it as Asian American community, because I want the Asian American community aggregate of how much we raise, because then that demonstrates to an administration how much this community has raised. So even at this very local level, if you do that, that builds influence, pure and simple. So you don't have to write a big check. You can put a little bit of money in and get other people to put money in. And that is probably the single biggest way to be able to do that. So so that's a great way to, you know, have influence in policy and access. So
Right. Yeah. The money is, until we fix it, that's the name of the game. And it's a matter of how do you do that for the candidates that you support and that you think are aligned with what you want to see, the vision for your community, and getting that. And I would say also, if you, even if you can't, if you say, well, I don't have a big network, or obviously I can't write the big check, you know, it's not as much, but I think that in this day and age with the grassroots campaigns, volunteering, if you can give some time, all candidates need two things: money and time.
Yeah.
And if you can give both, wonderful. If you can give one, it's going to help. And I know that, you know, my campaign was powered very strongly by volunteers, and those people, you know, mean the world to me. We will know each other lifelong, whatever I do, whatever they do, that access, that ability to work together is always there. So, and volunteering is also really important.
Yep.
So we have a question from Tommy. How did you find the right campaign manager when deciding to run for office?
Yeah, there's a very big, every city and every political system, there is an ecosystem of political consultants and campaign managers. They're generally, you know, going to be, you know, in the 25 to 35 bracket of age, because it's a very energetic, time demanding profession. You know, so they're very, you know, the higher up you run for office, the more money it's going to cost. So, but it's getting to know the political consulting community. And you can ask the elected officials, you know, like, who's your campaign manager? Who's your political consultant? But where there's a deficit right now is actually, and it's talked a lot about nationally, is that there's a deficit of people of color campaign managers and consultants, because it is very white. So that diversity in industry is something that's needed. So, and I've only, so far, just the other day, only ran across one Chinese American campaign manager for a US congressional race. So you think of all the congressional races in the United States, you know, I mean, he was one of the first ones I've ever met. That was just recently. So, so that's, I think that's to find them, talk to elected officials, people around. But, you know, if I was to ever do it again, I want to search, you know, support those others that are Asian American that are in that space. And there are pockets of operatives, you know, around, but there's just not a big industry. So it's predominantly still very white dominated industry. So, yeah. I see there was actually another question about.
There's a follow-up to the previous question.
Yeah.
So which local elected officials are the best ones to know and have in your network? So I think, and Dale, I'm not sure where you are, but are you saying, you know, for city council probably versus other local officials? If you're here in Arizona, we also have board of supervisors, and there's different things. So maybe, I don't know if Dale, if you're still watching, let us know kind of where you are. There we go, Orange County.
Okay. Oh, I know Dale. Good. Hi, Dale. How are you? Let's see. So which elected officials? Well, I guess it depends on what level of influence and impact you're trying to make. If it's, the governor's race, I mean, there are ways to be able to be influential in that, but at the local city council level, I mean, yeah, it just kind of, it just depends on where you are constituently in the geographically, and which political philosophy and ideology you want to follow. Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. But so, and the one that most impacts you directly. If it's you have a business in a city, say in Irvine, California, or or in Huntington Beach or wherever, you want to get to know that mayor and that local city council member. So that's one way. Yeah, but I mean, feel free to reach out to me. I can help identify that if ever needed, and also any political consultants. I know some in California too as well, Asian American operatives that do all that space, and they can always recommend that too.
Great. Well, while we are waiting for some other questions, we have some more time, and we're going to talk about some more topics.
Well, there was one other question I saw.
Bias.
Yeah.
Bias. Yes.
Okay. When I ran for office, I was expecting it, but I didn't get it. But I did get it from the place I did not expect it. Was from one of the local, very left, let's just say liberal papers. And they were actually surprisingly hostile to me because I was challenging frankly, a progressive white male on city council, an incumbent. And this paper was so offended that I was doing it. And I can distinctly remember the interview during the board interview. I walk into the board of directors interview and it was all white, and this is Seattle, which you would think would be most diverse. And so their questioning was incredibly, I thought, borderline racist. Is why are you running? I said I wanted representation on the city council because there's no Asian Americans. And they named the one person of color on there. They said, well, you have that person. I said, well, that's beside the point. Yes, there needs to be more. And then they wrote a follow-up article because a lot of my donors were Asian American. And they actually wrote, this one reporter just had it with me for whatever reason, and wrote specifically in his report that I have all these Asian donors, and this is coming from a progressive paper. So it was, so yeah, like I said, I was expecting to get it from voters, but actually I got it from the media. So, so with the one lesson to learn when you learn, when you run, you learn who your friends are, you know who your friends are not. So be prepared for that.
Yes. Yeah. I think you have to have thick skin. You have to be prepared. I think as a person of color, you're always open to other attacks that you wouldn't be. Hopefully that's changing as we continue to, see, particularly Asian American, we're the fastest growing minority group. So these things and those viewpoints are changing. But yeah, you have to be ready and you have to keep your friends close, right?
And you and I, we turned out just fine.
Just fine, battle scars maybe, but we'll get through them, right? So, and as you all that are watching have seen with Albert, it opened so many doors for him, having those connections and making that sacrifice. But again, you don't have to run. Getting involved is the first step. And on that note, that kind of takes us to a question I wanted to ask. It's a question that came up in our planning meeting for this conversation, and it's still out there. It's still out there in our AAPI communities, which is, does my vote really count? That's a battle we have culturally, right? Our upbringings, a lot of us, if we're first, second generation, or for immigrant families, that conversation it's not civic engagement. It's not really a part of it always. It's changing. It's changing in the right direction. But what would you say to someone that's really trying to, whether it's working right now on the current election and they're out there, they're working, whether it's, I know you're doing a lot for Biden, AAPI's for Biden, and they're trying to have this conversation with people. What would your advice be?
We have to look, we're all US citizens in this country, and that is the one fundamental thing that makes this democracy, is our ability to vote. So yes, if someone says your vote doesn't count, that is not true. It absolutely counts. If you look at the 2000 presidential election, George Bush won that by 700 votes, right? So you think about that. So every vote counts. It may not feel like it does, but it counts so much. Why else would, some parties go to such lengths to do voter suppression? Because they know the power of the vote. So it is important that everybody, again, regardless of party affiliation, you exercise that right. I know we're all busy during a pre-pandemic world, you had your busy life. It's not easy. You had to drive somewhere. In Washington State, it was easy. It was mail-in ballot. We've done that for many, many years. So it's a very easy system. So I'd say for those that doubt their vote counts, do not think that. I can guarantee you every vote has value, and that is the most value you can do. Even though you're one, but take that one times four in your family, that's five. And if a race is decided by 10 votes or less, that's the difference. So that is why everyone needs to, at least if you're not going to be politically involved, is to vote. Because otherwise, why are we Americans? Because
Right.
we have to vote.
Right.
So
That's
you
what I'm saying.
yeah,
It
you ran
has,
too. So,
exactly. I mean, I think for me, it's, people say your civic engagement, your choice. And for me, it's comes down to, particularly as children of immigrants and immigrant families who came here for a specific vision of an American dream, then to not honor that responsibility, because to me it's a responsibility to vote, to at least protect that vision, or to influence it the way you believe it should go. Your vote is that one thing. There's money, there's volunteering time, but your vote, it's free. It's the one thing that you can do. Here in Arizona, for those of you that are watching from Arizona, we're almost 80 in Maricopa County, more than 80% mail ballot already, but pre-pandemic, just like Washington State. So it's easy, it's doable. I'm going to do a little voting plug really quick. If you're not sure if you're registered, and you're depending on where you are in the country, go to iwillvote.com. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you request your ballot. If you haven't, you can check your status in anything. If you're here in Maricopa County, watching one of the Excels in Arizona, then go to beballotready.vote. So we just want to encourage you, again, whatever side you're on, voting is key. That is your right. That is your voice. That is your way of affecting change for your family, for your business, for your community. If nothing else from this, we want to make sure you hear that message. I am going to see if we have any other questions coming in. But Albert, kind of tell me, you transitioned out of the Obama administration and now moving into working on smart cities. And so let's get a little techie here for a minute. Can you give us, is there any insights you can give us of kind of where we're seeing, we hear a lot about 5G, we hear what's going on, but with the political landscape, these are not the conversations that were really coming, to the forefront. But what do you see as the future that you can kind of give us some influence on what you guys are doing with smart cities? Or you're specifically airports, is that correct?
Yeah, smart cities, smart airports predominantly, and and 5G is part of the base network that's going to be part of it. Yeah, I mean, from Verizon perspective, 5G is the next industrial revolution. I mean, it is going to bring so much power and speed and lower latency to our ability to communicate using technology. I mean, it's limitless. It's unlimited amount of communication speed that we're going to see as 5G is deployed. So it is being deployed in a lot of cities around the country. It is being deployed at airports already. And what we're actually seeing right now in terms of, because of the pandemic, as 5G is being deployed, because airports and airlines are being so stressed economically, what are pandemic technologies that can be used 5G to help them get back? You're seeing more, pandemic technologies with 5G. They want to explore, fever thermal detection. They will look at touchless-based systems. How can airlines use 5G and to digitize their maintenance and turnover of aircraft, knowing they're going to have a reduced workforce? So the aviation sector is now starting to grab onto in terms of, once we get 5G, what do we do with it? What are those solutions? So I view 5G as really sort of an innovation platform, just sort of like our mobile devices, right? The Apple made the phone, and it's the applications on top of that which drive the innovation. 5G is a lot of ways like that too. So Verizon is investing heavily right now in infrastructure to deploy 5G around the country. And right, Apple, I think, is going to announce pretty soon, they're going to have a 5G phone. So that trend is coming, and it is coming rapidly, and we want to make sure it gets deployed equally too. So yeah.
Looking at the political landscape and what's happening with 5G and where we're moving tech in the tech world and the tech sector, I often feel like is moving a lot faster than our government is willing to understand that it's moving. I mean, has that been your assessment, or where do you see that policy? And I know this is a very broad question, but is there kind of a pain point that you're seeing with the government right now in order to enable these technologies?
Well, I think it gets back to, we need more good people to run. And, frankly, we need some more younger people to be in there, because I think, our governance system is based upon seniority. And grandly, we have a lot of legacy leaders that have been in a long time, but, I'm a Gen X, I'm a proud Gen X, and I think we need to say that more. There's millennials and Gen Zs. Those three generations are really part of, right, the internet revolution. So once you get into those policy positions, I think then we can deploy better policies that are more impactful, can help the industry along instead of challenging the industry. So I think at some point, my hope is that, when we get to the senior levels of, Congress, and that, we need more leaders to run, frankly, that understand technology policy. I mean, it's right. It is incredibly rapid right now, what's happening. So it's a big catch up, for regulators and policymakers to figure out how they're going to regulate it. So, but it's a great question. So it's definitely going to go on for a while.
It is. I mean, I think that was something that we talked about a lot in my race, specifically coming from tech, understanding what does tech look like? There's, even if you just simplify it down, we're talking 5G, very, really ahead on innovation, but simplify it down to cybersecurity and things that concern the average American with their data and privacy and all the things that we hear. And yes, we see, I think local level, we have more success with this, but we see at the federal level, people talking about cybersecurity, people talking about data privacy, but not having, like you said, the understanding. We really need a different generation to start running with those backgrounds, with those understandings of the business models of these tech companies. Because if you don't understand the business model, forget if you understand the technology. You've got to know both, and really what is happening out there so that private and public sector can work together more effectively and in the interest of public safety and moving forward as a country. So yeah, I think we have a question. Let me see. Can you talk about the kind of issues involved in each levels of government? So city, county, state, and federal. So we can kind of maybe give a little bit of that. Do you want to take the city aspect?
Yeah, your local community. I mean, coming from Seattle, I mean, one of the biggest issues is affordable housing, right? So that is a huge issue in terms of in zoning policy, where to put affordable housing. Are there going to be levies so they can build more affordable housing? I mean, that's one. Homelessness, we're seeing crime, actually one of the things that's dominated our headlines is racial equity in law enforcement, in terms of, how law enforcement is treating African Americans and minorities, and the criminal justice system that is, very biased against lower income and people of color. So, I mean, I think cuts to, the heart of what a lot of cities are grappling with right now. And especially think about the pandemic, there is no revenue, right? So restaurants are not bringing in sales revenue, same with hotels. So they have no budget. And, so that translates up. Only federal government can bail out state and local government. So what do cities have to prioritize, with the money they do have to bring essential services? So if you look at from a pandemic world, what's going on right now, those are some of the biggest issues. And obviously at the state level, it's really no different. It's just a bigger case. And usually states run the freeways, the DOTs run the highways, and, make sure those are fixed. They have money, they get money from the federal government. And obviously the federal level, that's at the top of our political spectrum right now of the national narrative, what is going on nationally. So I mean, too, there's just so many issues but that's why we need good people in there in order to help solve those problems.
Right, and it's critical at every level, because I think what dominates our news cycle, what dominates the headlines, is the federal government and those positions. But what happens at your local levels, at the city, at county level, even in your school board,
Yep.
that's where you feel that impact more immediately in your life. Take education, for example. The federal government, if I had gotten there into Congress, I would have very little impact on what is happening to the public schools here in Arizona, because that is really a state issue. And so that is why voting down the ballot all the way, making sure you understand all of these positions, is so important, because we hear about this and it's, yes, please vote the top of the ticket, so critical, but don't just think that's enough, because these local level, here in Maricopa County, we have all our county officials up right now. All of them are critical to what is one of the biggest counties in the country. Again, school board, so important to affecting immediately the quality of education you're going to see your children get. And like you said, Albert, with the pandemic, yes, the federal government, we hear about these great relief packages coming down, but how it is spent in your state and how it's managed is those state elected officials. And that's what's so critical about this. So that was a great question. I think that most people kind of either know really well about one or the other and don't often see the connection. But is there anything you want to kind of add in general, as we're getting kind of close on time here? We do have some more time, but as questions come in, just really about why you feel it is so important. Particularly, let's bring it back to business. We know Excel is really here to help our business owners and people in business to be so engaged in politics. What is it that I think people are, there's something missing sometimes in the way we think about, and it's cultural too, that we kind of heads down, we work hard, we succeed in business, that's the goal, but missing that political aspect. What else could you tell people about that?
Well, if you look at the pandemic now, in terms of just how much economic devastation is done to Asian American businesses, we've had to deal with, not only the fiscal challenges, but also the racial challenges, right? Because the many Chinatowns or Koreatowns, Vietnamese towns, all those restaurants, storefronts, and coffee shops are faced with, racial hate because of the national narrative, what's going on. So it's important now more than ever that the business community take a stand and get to understand what are the policies going to come and what they need to advocate for. Because if you don't say anything, you don't exist. And so if more business owners can tell their story, use social media, because that's a great low-cost way to do it, to put out what's going on, and get together with other businesses or join. A lot of them businesses just like yourselves, there's other chambers of commerce. And those chambers are incredibly powerful organizations to bring a policy narrative to support their businesses. So it's a partnership, right, between members of your organization and what you're going to advocate for. What are you going to write out as a policy position to help businesses and tell the story, and get to know, frankly, the congressional members of your district or even the Senate level. You're in a big Senate battle right now. So who's going to be that eventual winner is going to have a lot of impact in terms of how much funding is going to come to the state. So it's a big one to bite off right now, but we are just face such a difficult challenge, especially now, the Asian American business community. So government contracts are still flowing to an extent. So, but they become even more valuable, more competitive to go after, depending on the industry, that business owners. And so now that's when politics becomes more powerful, in terms of what RFP is going to come out, what money is the city going to focus on during the pandemic, and how can I get the best market intelligence to get in there and propose, and who the other partners I can work with. So that's a multi-layered answer there for you, but that's, again, during the pandemic, this is probably the most important time to understand politics and what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to share your stories. I like that. That's kind of something that I've always said, is that stories really do. People think that, again, you don't have to run for office, but simply sharing your story and help elevating other stories. Stories change the world. We've seen this with social movements. We've seen this with different movements politically over the course of many, many years, that when people come together and really unite around talking about this issue because they have a personal experience, those personal experiences are what people need to hear, because they do impact not only the elected officials, but they impact the people in your community that are voting as well, if they know those stories. And I know it's sometimes hard for us to share those stories, but it's so important because otherwise we won't be heard, and it is your voice. We have a question about really technology in politics. And so with technology advancing and more information on politicians becoming, they're more available to everybody, information's available, we're available, everything is by the minute. How do you think running a campaign in the future, 5 to 10 years from now, would look like in regards to smear campaigns? Is it going to get worse?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah. Make the prediction now.
Yeah, from what I have seen, yes, technology and politics are highly integrated right now in terms of the ability to mine data, mine voter files, see who's voting generally which way, and where's the best place to target money and resources. So that's going to continue to evolve. As far as messaging, we still get mail pieces, right? So everyone's still getting mail pieces. For whatever reason, they seem to think mail.
Still work.
Yeah, exactly. So I think at some point that's going to go away. We're going to get more. Now we're getting more text messages and phone messages and social media hits. But now you're seeing, frankly, the social media companies now actually starting to have exercise some restrictions on what you can say to prevent false information and smearing. Exactly that. So again, that gets back to the federal side regulatory framework in terms of how much power, government is going to let social media and these technology companies have that kind of power to let loose, or have some guardrails in place to protect the integrity of our political system. So I think that's all evolving very quickly, even in the current campaign we're seeing right now in terms of how, but I think one of the main messages is, I think it can get better. It can't, the only way it can get better, and not to be partisan here, but it's really a matter of whoever sits at the top and what they say makes a difference. And if you have people that say things, in a manner that's respectful, then that does actually tend to calm things down. So, so there's a difference in terms of, and that's what leadership is. What leaders do has an impact, regardless of which base they're trying to appease. But that's the main thing. So our only hope is that there is some civility that does come back eventually, because I know we've talked about domestically, but if you think internationally, geopolitically, foreign policy, a lot of us have business in China, business in Asia, other parts of the world that we all have ties to. That is all impactful on trade policy and how that affects our local business in our community. So directly, so yeah, I wish I can have a crystal ball say this is what it's going to be like. But again, it does come back to, in terms of who we get into Congress, who we get to be the leaders. And I think business leaders that go into politics bring better stability, to that, because most politicians are lawyers for whatever reason. I don't know, but we need more business leaders in there. Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely modeling. I agree with you. It's always, people say, how do you change, whatever happens, I'm not going to even say this, but this country has to rebuild in so many ways on the modeling of leadership. And it is, I think that business people bring, particularly if you've run your own business or started your own business, or really been where you have, even if you just led a team, whether it even be 2 people or 1 person, you have an understanding of how to bring sides together. People always talk in politics about, how are you going to work across the aisle? But we do that in business all the time. We don't just stop working on a product and stop the complete life cycle of that product because we don't agree. You find those compromises, you work through it. And I think business people in politics for that reason would have so much more of a great impact on actually progress and moving policy forward, which we're not seeing happen right now for a lot of reasons other than just disagreements of personality. A lot of it's money in politics, and that's a whole other course in what's happening politically. But I agree with you that modeling is so critical. So, and I think, Albert, you are giving, and I don't know if somebody from Excel can put this in the Facebook, if anyone wants to follow up with Albert, his contact information. We'll put that in the comments for you. And do we respond to the text messages from political volunteers? Albert, do you respond? I'm 50-50. I do to some, I don't to all, but I sometimes thank people for what they're doing, even if I've already registered to vote or voted. Or how about you?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, right now I'm doing a lot here in Texas volunteering. So yeah, there are people I do know that came out to volunteer. So yeah, I help guide them along, give them advice. The good thing about technology now is, and many campaigns are using these new platforms to help get information out, especially during the pandemic. So there's a lot of different ways. So yeah, same thing. If there's time and it's a good question, yeah, happy to help in any way possible. So, but most people have been very respectful of our time. So
right, yeah. Well, good. Well, I think we are close to wrapping up. Albert, did you have any final words just for everybody at Excel that's really interested? And we had some great questions today. Thank you. Interested in politics and how they can get further involved?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground, but I think it's upon everybody's self in terms of take the time to understand, get to know your elected official, volunteer for them, help raise some money, get to know you, right, more, and you can definitely give a lot of guidance there in Arizona or myself here in Texas. Politics is the same no matter where you go.
Right.
But my main message is don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to ask to participate, and don't be afraid to ask for money. We have no problem going to the bank asking for a loan. It's no different asking, for fundraising dollars or something like that. So it's really the same. But Asians, we do tend to be shy and bashful that way, but it's no different. So, but I think the energy and questions here have been phenomenal, and I enjoyed the dialogue here. So I hope we can continue to do this. And I think it's been a very valuable conversation.
We thank you so much for joining us all the way, and we know it's late where you are as well. So we know that this is a chunk of time that we are so grateful for. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I hope to get out there when we did a roundtable. I think one of your members, Rodney, he owns a couple bars out there in Tempe. So Jason, so I plan to go there and visit, and we can all have a drink together. So
that would be great. I'm sure everyone would join that. And now everyone's gonna have your email, so they're all gonna come out to the bar. Post-pandemic, we'll do it safely.
Sure. Correct.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. We are going to wrap up today with just some information about how you can keep in touch. If you would like to stay in the loop or be more involved with Excel, you're welcome to join as a member. We hope you will join as a member. There are chapters again in Phoenix, Southern California, San Jose, Las Vegas, as well as what we mentioned, the collegiate chapters at the University of Arizona and Arizona State University. And the process is very easy to join. There's information on that membership, and how you can get that is on the website. So thank you again, all of you, for joining us here this evening. We would like to thank our volunteers for this wonderful organization, Faye and Jason Wong, and connecting us with our wonderful guest speaker. Thank you again, Albert, for being here and helping us plan this event. Thank you to Kathleen for running all the technical aspects and making sure that you're seeing these great slides and keeping us on track. And tech support also by Pranav, and our marketing support by Brittany Wynn. We'd like to thank one more time our guest speaker, Albert. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. Please do follow up with any questions. Good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.